Yeah. Mike, no jokes today. This is my show. That's rule number one. I'll use that one again. I'm Dean.
Hi, Dean.
How's it going? I'm a lot less nervous this week, so I didn't wear underwear. And I wore sleeveless, like you. No one. Well, you didn't have the shirt, so you couldn't do it. But yeah, and like I got water. I'm not getting paid a bunch of money to come here and get free Cokes the whole conversation. So, and I'm not a PhD.
That's the doctor gets you.
So, my experience. So my background is I'm essentially a nutrition coach. I work for a company called Stronger You, and a lot of the people I deal with are generally like, you're gonna sneeze right now. 25 to 40-year-old females. We have, I want to say about 80% females in the company and about 20% males. I'm not going to use the same joke as last time. We'll just, okay. Admin thinks I'm big, obviously. And so they give me a lot of dudes, and they think I like dudes, and like that's, like I do. And then saying that out loud is kind of, saying that I'm married, so there we go, there's zero. True. Different countries. We were roommates. Yeah, and I won't. Yeah. So my question comes. So this whole point of this course is like you think you know what you know, and like I'm one of those guys. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do regardless. So I know what I know, and essentially Ben wants to teach us we don't know what we know, and then I essentially know nothing, and then I want to learn to actually know what I know. You feel me? And yeah, it's the whole point of this course. But one of my observations with my clients is that, so we help people lose fat. Okay, and I want to say that that's the hardest part. But a lot of the times, especially we're dealing in macros, we're dealing behavior change, we're dealing with people who are paying money to do this thing. And it tends to be a lot of times the fat loss part is the easy part. It's what do we do after? And as a coach, one of my biggest things, and we kind of talked about this either in the conversation or after, but morally and ethically, I don't want to release these people into the wild, I call it, without not necessarily a plan, but something where they're not going to gain that weight back because the statistics aren't good with people who lose fat. And they're paying good money for us to kind of have that conversation with them. And so I want to feel good about what that is. And observationally, like a lot of the people that have gotten to that stage and I've added calories back in, they think I'm a fucking magician. They either lose weight or they maintain weight at higher calories, and then I got them. And then it's like, can we drive those calories up? And to me, my goal is like in a world where there's food excess, there's McDonald's, Tim Hortons, you guys know that's a last week joke. It's like Starbucks for Canada, just way worse, and donuts. But we live in a world of excess, and so when I release them into the wild, like I don't know if I'm confident in letting them in that spot when they're on a low-calorie diet, probably compensating energy-wise, and they're hungry as shit all the time. And so the question is for me, what is this thing that I'm like doing? And that kind of led me to this higher energy flux talk. But my question is higher energy flux better than lower energy flux for weight loss maintenance? And that's a key point because I'm dealing in a population and a question that's answering what do we do after they've lost weight? So that's where my brain is at when we go through all this. Another thing I might do is we got this laser pointer, which is way different than last week. I might just point it in your eye the whole time. You got one? Oh, two eyes. Well, I'll do one per slide. So what is this? What is energy flux? So a lot of people probably already know this, and maybe if you don't, but it's the overall rate of energy movement through the system, and this is termed energy flux. So energy in, which is stuff we eat, equals energy out, the stuff we do. Like that's kind of general. This idea of higher energy flux is the more energy you put in, the more energy you get out, and the lower energy you put in, the lower energy you get out, okay? That's quite simply. My boy David, he had a pretty good activity, so I want everyone to close their eyes and like actually close your eyes. Look down. This is Avatar time. This is Chad time. Chad he's an ex-CrossFit athlete. He's lost about 45 pounds. He's like my athlete. He's a guy. He likes lifting. Got a tattoo with like muscles on his arms on the right. And then like he went and got a PhD, moved out to the jungle, and homeboy like wants to know what to do after he's lost all the weight. And for any time I mention Chad is actually Ben House. So Ben Ellis isn't my client. My client, you can open your eyes. I just like that. I had to do one joke where it was like, I just like that activity because it gets you zoned in. But, so I'm thinking Chad, Ben Ellis, is my client who's lost, let's say he's 45 pounds, he's in the CrossFit, he's lifting, he's doing stuff. There's two different versions of Chad in this story, and especially when we're dealing with weight loss maintenance in the long term, we got high flux Chad, Ben Ellis, and actually, you're probably, low flux Chad. Low flux or high flux Chad is eating 3,000 calories a day. It's a 500 calorie deficit, give or take, depending on our goals. And then we have 2,000 calorie Chad, which is low flux Chad, and same deficit. So he's operating in the same world with the same goals, but he's balanced at either end of the equation. And so I want you to think about as we go through, which Chad, Ben House, do you want in this total equation? Do you want the 3,000 calories or do you want 2,000 calories? And my main argument with a lot of this stuff is in terms of environment, we can't change that a lot of times, especially in Western society. So they're getting put into this place with all this stuff, and they're hungry, and they have 2,000 calories or 3,000 calories. Which one's going to do better long term? And like I know my biases, and I know we're not supposed to do biases here, but like it's a 20-minute conversation, so I'm biased as shit.
It's good to acknowledge it.
Well, yeah, it's just like that's what I do, and it's like you kind of go through this whole thing, and like you just realize you're so biased. It's not even funny. So I'm trying not to be, but I found all the studies that help my arguments. So that's where we're at. There's like two, so they both help. So it's 100%. So 2,000 calorie Chad, he eats chicken. He this is a good one for you. We got the thing. We got 2,000 calorie Chad. Same amount of food everywhere. 2,000 calorie Chad. He got his chicken, Parmesan, a little bit of sauces. Like he doesn't get much food, so he's got to make it taste good. Okay? Like you want to be that Chad. You're eating this like 6 times a day for 2,000 calories. We got. I ended the skeleton. Sorry. So we got 3,000 calorie Chad. He likes to eat his vegetables, chicken for protein, Whole Foods, paleo. Like he wants to include some of that. So like you know, have some rice, and like homeboy's gonna eat fries. Like he says he's not going to, but he's probably not gonna track it when he's coached with me. But when he's out, he's putting fries on there. And so, which Chad do you want what Chad do you trust in our current environment? 3,000 calorie Chad. 2,000 calorie Chad. I won't do that again.
3,000 calorie Chad has fries and tells you about it. So is he 3,000 calorie Chad?
Well, just let my joke, like my show. No, like no questions and jokes that aren't from me. That's. I made that up on the fly, so I didn't think about it. Okay? He's tracking it and he's eating fries. 3,000 calories. Shit. Yeah, it'll make sense. So I want to look at, like, what does this look like in the real world, so to speak? And like, I found something pretty cool that I think will kind of start to answer some of these questions as we go into. Man, like you're a PhD, you don't have to ruin everyone's stuff. Like, the Amish. Does everyone know who the Amish is? Like, what the Amish are, what they do? Do you know what the Amish is? Yeah, they choose to live in the 1800s. So they have things like they don't like cell phones, they don't like computers, they don't want to watch TV. They're pretty selective, so it's kind of bullshit. They'll have they'll like step around those rules and get rides to Walmart, but they're not actually using it. They're no. Well, what you'll see, they're way leaner than you. But they do things. They have like tractors, so they're like cheaters. But they choose not to be in they choose not to be in the environment that we are currently in, and not necessarily here, but back home. Man, you got me going. This is great. So they choose to live in the 1800s. So like, and if you look, this doesn't show up, but this chick has Nikes on. So it's like all these things we want to dress this way and be in the 1800s, but we'll wear Nikes because it's convenient, and tractors are convenient. But like they live in a different time than we live in. Different influences, different outside factors, different levels of activity. So Bassett et al., 2004, there's 98 subjects, 53 males, 45 females. This is a pretty big sample size for this one community. You're skipping ahead, man. Like, just let me make my point. So I should have took that out because that doesn't, the wow factor is kind of gone after that. But This is like they put pedometers on these people, and they give them questionnaires for activity. So they rank them based on activity, which they didn't put on charts, but essentially these people worked a lot. Like they were farmers, they were construction workers, they were woodworkers. They did a lot of work. And when you see with the pedometers, they didn't track food, and I'll go over that after, but here's the crazy thing. Like this is, so not everyone here knows Jeb, but like when we were going through this whole process, I was like, you got to look at the study. I didn't want to like tell him what I saw. I'm like, just tell me what you think. Because I'm like thinking like, I'm just looking at research, like I'm a total idiot. But like, I think that's like a thing. And if you look, I was going through this and I was just like shocked. They're 9.4% body fat for the males, 0% prevalence of obesity. The women were in pretty good shape at 25% and then 9% obesity, okay? Like that's pretty shocking.
So that previous slide was 16.7.
BMI.
Body fat. No, it wasn't. 16.
Yeah, sorry. That's a total of the community. But like if you look at, so I'm looking at the males with the females, so that's an average. But when you look at the population, which we'll look at what they're doing, that's the shocker there. And you'll see the males are a lot different than the females in terms of the work they do. But the actual results is like, when I looked at this, I was like, they solved the BC. Like they fucking, like.
Oh, so that should be your body fat percentage.
Yes.
Body fat.
Yeah.
You had,
This
on
is
the previous
BMI.
slide, you had 16.7 BMI.
Yeah. Man, this is my show. I said no questions. But,
It's really low.
yeah, just relax.
I'll get
That's the shocker, okay? They're shredded. Like, what were you when you were competing at? Like 12% body fat? These people were 9.4. So that's crazy to me, though. So, like, that's a population level where, like, man, I believe we get through this as a stand-up. Can't mess with my jokes. So again, different. So the one thing here is like look at so woodworkers, construction workers for the males, farmers. They're doing lots of work. Women were homemakers, but they're still in like pretty good shape. And when you'll see with this chart, this just shows that they're shredded. And again, let's just assume that they're not all 5% body fat and they're a little bit higher. There's still a lot. They're in shape, and obesity's not there. So like, what the fuck's going on? And what you'll see is they just do more shit. Okay, so like. Monday to Saturday, average steps for the females is about 15,000, and for males it's about 20 to 22. They had some outliers that were at 30,000, but a lot of their work consisted of farming, walking from house to house, doing farming. They're just always moving. And then on Sunday, they're averaging at 10 because God forbid they walk 20,000 steps during church day. But 10,000 is like, I don't know how many clients you guys have, but like 2,000 to 4,000 is on a good day. Okay, and on their like low day, it's 10,000. So there's some clues there. I mentioned they didn't do diet, but there's some unpublished studies that report a higher than normal calorie intake in this specific group. So kind of if you look at pre-World War II rural diets, they're eating a lot of meat, potatoes, gravy, eggs, vegetables, bread, pies, cakes. So shit that's high in fat and high in refined sugar. And they kind of averaged out, they thought around 3,600 calories for men and 2,000 calories for women. So they're talking about this high flux equation before there's an even term for it. And so a lot of these studies, not a Coke, would be nice. A lot of these studies didn't have the terminology, so when we go through this stuff, it's like I had to look and dig deep to kind of find at a population level, what does this look like and how can we use it? And that's kind of where we're going. So, yeah. What the hell? Oh, yeah. So let's look at this specifically. So high flux versus low flux. I'm going to rip through these now. So Humed et al. 2016, they had 239 subjects. They tested baseline RMR, body fat percentage, and they had 3 and 2 year follow-ups. For the women were 2 years and adolescents were 3 years. They did doubly labeled water for 2 weeks to get their total energy intake and total energy expenditure. But the cool thing about this is they tossed out everyone that wasn't in balance. So the point was to test high balance versus low balance, and is that predictive of weight loss maintenance in the long term? And so they tossed out everyone that was kind of had a weird reading and just kept the high energy flux and the low energy flux. These are not Amish. So the Amish are gone now. Like there's, like I wish everyone was Amish. Like that's my main point. Thanks for ruining it. But what people commonly would think of a lot of the simple stories is that if you eat less, you're going to weigh less over time. And the low energy flux at the top here, it was actually predictive of weight gain over time compared to the high energy flux. So eating less and doing less, eating more and doing more was more predictive of weight loss over the long term. So sweet, fits my bias. Like in the study, like guys going in the presentation, done. Paris et al. 2016. So smaller study, 6 obese adults, PMI, 30%, 30%. They didn't diet for 12 months, so no recovery diet, no Eric Helms diet, no Ben diet, no Weight Watchers, no like Instagram doctor diet. Like they just didn't diet. And the cool thing about the 4 phases of the study was they covered their bases. So they had their pre-weight baseline testing. They had a diet-induced weight loss of about 7%. Ish, I think it was 7, and then they had a weight loss stabilization period. So they covered all their bases. They lost their weight, they stabilized it, and then they tested high flux versus low flux. So at first they tested low flux, they just did less, and they ate less, and they matched that, had a washout period, and then they tested them with high energy flux. They upped it about 500 calories in energy expenditure and matched that with food. And the one big thing and one take-home point that like was a big home run for me is that the lower energy flux was a lot hungrier subjectively than the high energy flux. And that seems logical, the people eating less are hungry, but it's nice to see in an energy balance situation what that looks like. Because a lot of my clients, and this high energy flux was 3,200 calories versus 2,500 calories for low flux. Like that's a big difference. And a lot of my clients, when I release them into this world, is like, hunger is the enemy. Outside of it, take everything out of it. It's hard for me to expect them to not eat the cookie when there's cookies everywhere. Like maybe if I tell them to, but again, I want them to do that without me, and like that's hard for me to do. So hunger is a huge issue, and when you combine that with environment, we have an argument for this higher energy flux thing. So is higher energy flux better than lower energy flux? In general, populations looking to transition out of a diet. Did I get that right, Eric? Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm gonna say yeah, I'm biased, but like this is what I presented on last week, so I had a bunch of stuff. But now it's kind of like let's look a little bit deeper into what's going on here. So again, fits my bias. I like higher energy flux because I've seen it observationally, and there's some studies that support that. But like, what kind of tools can we use that are useful for you guys to go forward? And again, predictive of long-term weight loss. You're able to sustain a higher calorie intake in a culture of food in excess. So that's the environment argument. I put them in the environment, they can eat more. I think they'll be better off. And hunger signaling is at a minimum. They're not as hungry. Karen, who's eating 1,200 calories versus Karen that's eating 2,000 calories. Karen that's eating 1,200 calories, like one fuck up, one Arby's meal out, she's pretty much done for the day and she feels bad about it, and like there's just not that much opportunity to make that right. She basically have to eat salad and eat salad. And then 2,000 calorie Karen, she can eat a little bit of Arby's and then I think she'll be better off and she's not as hungry. So two things is like if 1,200 calorie Karen sees Arby's, she's hungry as shit, she's gonna eat Arby's. Like I would expect that. It might not be all the time, but like again, I'm releasing these people into the wild. What can I do to help that? Higher energy flux kind of curbs that hunger. So I kind of I think I coined this. I might have just stolen this, but I'm going to say, eat more, move more, do more. It's kind of like the equation that I like to think going into this thing. And what does it actually mean? So the simple stories, and part of this assignment was like, what are these simple stories? Eat less, lose more. Or you hear, like you see it on Instagram, you see like coaches throwing it all the time, you just need to eat less. Like it's just that easy, Karen. Like don't eat Arby's. But when they're hungry, that's a hard thing to do. So I don't think that story is very helpful. And this is when we talk about adaptive thermogenesis or metabolic adaptation, is that a clinically significant decline in energy expenditure after weight loss occurs, that non-resting energy expenditure is the primary compartment in which energy expenditure is reduced. Okay, and this can happen almost indefinitely. So lower energy flux, you eat 1,200 calories, at a certain point you may have a deficit. And then your body will start to down-regulate stuff, a lot of times physical activity and eat. And then we can get to a point where we're even, and then at a certain point, they're gonna be in a surplus. Basically, you can't just keep taking away food. It's not that simple. And so when that's your only hammer, in the long term, I don't know if that's helpful. And again, that's kind of a dick move. Like just eat less, just eat less. When we look at the higher energy flux stuff in a lot of the overfeeding studies, Mike, thanks, eat more and you can increase metabolism. So I'm not gonna say you need to eat more, you need to eat more, you need to eat more, but my argument is it's not that simple and it's not linear. So Harris et al. 2006, 16 lean, healthy, sedentary subjects, 2 weeks of weight maintenance feeding and then followed by 8 weeks of overfeeding, so 1,000 calories. The cool thing about this study is that they weren't going in to have an exercise intervention, so just do whatever you're gonna do. And what we see here is a story that's not so simple. So BMR is on the left. Essentially, there's a huge spike, but there's a small spike, acute spike in BMR from week 1 to week 2, a drop off, and then it kind of slowly increases. So there's an argument that metabolism gets spiked when you acutely overfeed them. Now, if you just keep overfeeding them, and this study was like everyone gained weight, it was like they all gained weight. So like overfeeding isn't the answer, but it just shows that it's not that simple. Eating less and eating more, you kind of got to be a coach and use some of these things to your advantage. So BMR does not change in a linear fashion. Like, that's the argument. It's not as linear as we all think. And so BMR initially increases rapidly and then decreases. Then they compared it to a bunch of other studies that kind of did the same thing, and then it's just a shit show of response. So what we're looking at is the variability in response to BMR to overfeeding. And like when I look at this kind of gives me a better indication of like it's not simple at all. It's not linear, and it's variable. So when we look at a lot of the high flux stuff, and I'm talking about person, that fat loss phase, and I'm trying to get out of that and release them in the wild, there's been responders where I'll add 250 calories and they'll drop 3 pounds. There's some that won't change any, and we can keep upping it. But it kind of gives me some direction to understand that it's not that simple, and you kind of got to use what you know as a coach to kind of make decisions. So if I have that responder, yeah, like it probably increased metabolism, and then I know like I can use that tool till I exhaust it and then look at other stuff. Here's my Diet Coke.
I'm gonna go get you one if you're gonna keep
Well, it's just, I like repeating jokes. It's funny to me. Like, I don't actually, you realize, like, the joke's happening regardless of whether anyone thinks it's funny. That's just how I do it.
At some point, do they get funny?
Well, everyone keeps laughing. Like, probably not, but I think for, like, a 30-minute presentation, it'll run its course. But so the literature on overfeeding human subjects over 0.2 weeks to 17 weeks suggests that BMR response to overfeeding is variable, and BMR increased by 10%. So like stuff happens when you overeat, stuff happens when you lose weight, but it's not the hammer of like you just need to keep eating less. But we can kind of fit that into the high flux equation because they're putting more energy into the system, and it does stuff. Cool. Another thing that is also a variable response when we talk about hunger is that, so they took reduced obese subjects and thin subjects, and they overfed them for 3 days, about 50% extra calories. And the hunger response was also variable. So in weight-reduced obese, a lot of the clients that I'm dealing with, the hunger wasn't really a thing. So they didn't get any more hungry or less hungry. And then with thin people, they actually got less hungry. That's the way to say it. So all that tells me is that these responders and it's been usually observationally with my clients that they've been a lower weight to start off with, and then they have their like whatever 15-pound goal, they've been pretty good responders to adding calories back in. And they're not as hungry, and they do all these things, and I was like, okay, that makes sense, because I haven't found that with the reduced obese. I still have to do other interventions, but the hunger wasn't a thing as we added in calories initially. And so that kind of explains, like, essentially you gotta use your brain. So if they have a different response, you have to have a different intervention, or at least have a different conversation. So then there's this idea of do more. Simple story is, oh, I didn't add a swear. I meant do whatever the F you want. But do more equals eat whatever you want. And like we can kind of make an argument for that. Like people ripped like me and Ben, not Eric. We can kind of eat whatever we want. Like is that true? Mike? Fuck, you shouldn't have said something at the beginning. Now it's just like I got focused. You literally made it so easy for everyone else. But yeah, that's a simple story. And Karen kind of like is believing this story. She got the blue tracksuit, picked the one with red stripes because red is fast. Got the blue matching shoes and the headband because like work's gonna go down. She's gonna get sweat, and she's again Carson, same joke, but Karen's getting ready to outwork a bad diet. Like, look at that face. That's a Eric face. That one didn't work. But we can kind of come to this logical argument that physical activity can facilitate weight maintenance through direct energy expenditure. Doing stuff, especially physical activity, burns energy. Like, that's a pretty logical thing, okay? The problem with a lot of these studies and why I didn't include actual exercise interventions is like they couldn't come to a conclusion whether it was good, bad, there was like just mixed results. And a lot of that comes down to compliance. And as coaches, a lot of us are probably gonna see this compliance thing in the real world, but it's relatively poor even when substantial behavior, psychological and environmental and financial support is provided. So all things are good and they still don't do it. All that tells me is that like, yeah, exercise is good, but we have to find the thing that they're gonna do. And sometimes, especially when we're not gonna have them doing something super specific, I just want them to do the thing they're gonna be most compliant for, because then I can drive the energy expenditure. And the studies don't really show that. They just show that we don't know if they followed it, and some show they're good, some show they're bad, but like I would think that a lot of the fitness stuff is a plus. I like to just coin it do more get more jacked. I was going to put jacked in regardless, but replace jacked with do more Peloton, do more CrossFit. Mike, do more rowing and like strongman stuff, and Eric, do more bodybuilding. Do the thing you're going to do, okay? I wanted to look at this on a population level. So when we look at this industrial India study, which I'll go through, which Eric pulled up the other day. I had it first. There's video to prove it from last week.
It's actually a different stuff.
It is?
But they're both the same.
Okay.
So you're good.
Yeah, nailed it. I wish I would have found your study, because you ruined my presentation.
Mine's from the 70s.
Yeah, okay, fair.
I'm helping you. This is good.
Yeah, it's good. This is a new study. Eric, you haven't even seen this one, have you? Really? Yeah. So Gene Mayer et al., 2018, 213 workers, so a large sample size. And they took, that wasn't the whole factory, but they took the people that were average height for that population. So everyone between 5'2" and 5'4", 26 different occupations. And they did physical activity questionnaires, much like the Amish, like how much work did you do in your thing? And food intakes were just interviews and questionnaires, but again, they were a lower income population. They lived in industrial India. Like the food was relative, it was like groundhogs day every day. So they said they had a pretty good idea what they were eating. And what we saw was that as they did less work, so sedentary positions to light work to medium work to heavy work to very hard work. So we got like managers and supervisors to clerks and mechanics, all the way to people bagging millwrights, cutters and blacksmiths. Basically, the more activity they did for their job, they kind of, if they were doing low activity, they weighed more. Okay, and it went all the way down to kind of like what they dubbed normal activity, the light work, and then it kind of just teetered off, but they were less weight, so they have that curve. And then the cool thing about me, so my high flux argument, I'm going to find the study that fits my thing, but there's this cool curve that I'll show you which kind of makes sense when we look at appetite, but the people that weren't doing as much ate just as much as the people that were doing lots, and then it teetered off to this light work. This is energy flux. So we kind of talked about this the other day, but these people are doing more and eating more, but they weigh less. They're in the same energy balance as a person who weighs more. And part of that is they said it was their BMR is up. So they're burning the same amount of energy, but they looked vastly different. So this was, I didn't even include the slides because Ben said not to the first time, and then I included them the second time. But they were super cutthroat. They're just like, yo, these sedentary people, they're fat. They're way fatter than everyone in like almost verbatim. And then the light work was normal activity. They just said they were essentially skinny fat, and these people are muscly. So they look vastly different at the same calorie level. And again, I think which Chad do I want? Do I want this Chad, or this Chad? I want this Chad because homeboy can eat 3,500 calories. He has a job that he works hard in, probably moves a lot, and he can have a bit of Arby's, okay? This, I don't want to, that actually screws up the walking thing. But, and so this gets into the Forwright study when he looked at some of the Hadma tribes, which we'll go over, but he had this idea of we have lower energy flux, more exercise equals higher energy flux, but the main thing here is this appetite curve. So as we go through the flux situation to normal activity, low activity, high activity, we have more hunger here for energy balance, and it kind of teeters off, and it comes up as we do more activity, probably trying to feed themselves to do the work. And that, so in these tribal studies, they didn't have the food to fulfill the appetite. So they had the appetite in the lower energy flux or the higher energy flux, but they didn't have the food. In this case, if you feed them in that lower energy flux, even with their appetite, they can just fulfill that appetite, and it mimics the exact same curve. So they're hungry, they eat. Okay, and then it teeters off because they have normal activity, and then as they go do more work, they get more hungry because they got to do more work. And for these people, they needed to make money. So if they couldn't do their job because they couldn't do the work, well, I don't know if they get fired. They probably just, I didn't ask them. They didn't say what happened. But it kind of gives us a kind of cool look at, does appetite in our current environment, and I'm using Western society as a thing, like is that the reason why people's weights are skyrocketing? Because they're hungry and they're going to eat. And so operating on that premise, I don't want to let my people out into the world with that assumption. It's not everyone, but move more. I was just going to put equals move more. I don't really, I like the simple story, biased. But we can look at NEAT as part of this higher energy flux equation, so stuff that we can do to push this. Pretty logical, resting 5.4 kilojoules a minute. Walking slowly, 1.6 kilometers an hour, it's almost 3 times the amount of energy burned. Cool. Walking more burns more energy. Again, logical. Basically, lean and obese subjects show substantial responses to energy expenditure to fidgeting like and strolling like walking. The potential for weight loss may exist in increasing these activities. Cool. Now let's look at the Poncer stuff in terms of, so what they looked at was they looked at the Hadza, is it Hadza? Hazda? Mazda. They follow the population that moves a lot, okay? And we'll show some stats about what they look like. But the men walked 15 kilometers a day downwards to like 12, and the women walked, and this was age at the bottom, but as they get older, they walk less, but they're still walking 6 to 5 kilometers a day, and that kind of equals out to about 6,000 steps to about upwards of 15 to 20,000 steps a day. Like, that's nuts. And like, what do those people look like? Because then we can have our argument for neat. I didn't blow this up. But the females, BMI 20.1, fat percentage 21. That's pretty fucking good. Males, same thing, BMI 20, body fat percentage 13. So in this population, very similar to the Amish, they move more, and they're not as jacked as I wouldn't say, they're not as shredded as the Amish, but like they're doing pretty fucking good. And then we go back to that Amish study, 15,000 steps for women, 20,000 steps for men. They're moving a lot, they're doing more work. 9.4, no obesity. Like, I like those odds. If I found other studies, I probably wouldn't include them because it doesn't fit my 20 minutes. And yeah. Possible risks. So I didn't go over this last time, but inherently when we think about these things, they're new, they're novel, they work, and we add them into people's lives, especially coming from a point of authority, that's dangerous. So we got to look at those things and probably make sure we communicate those issues to people. And it's not a lot, but there's some things you can start to think about. So an organism's total energy expenditure will be a product of its evolutionary history and potentially its development, their social environment, and be matched to the availability of food, energy, in its environment. So when I see that, this was in the same Poncer study, they were looking at essentially metabolic adaptation. As they walked more, you would think, especially when I'm talking about high flux, they would feed them more. But they were hunter-gatherers, so they couldn't get more. So a lot of their drop-offs wasn't the unconscious NEAT and the physical activity drop-offs. It was like the psychological drop-offs. They would lay down when they weren't working. They had like immune system problems if that became a problem, okay? And so they're gonna match for food environment. If I look at my clients, the food environment is like there's a fuckload of food. So they don't have that problem. What does that look like? I go back to that, the industrial India, weight goes up, okay? I need to know those risks. And again, there's this argument, and it just shows that, this is that Poncer's graph, that it's not that simple. So as physical activity goes up and we can't provide the right food for that, things start to drop off. Oh, that did not turn out great. But yeah, so like infectious diseases, they use reproductive and like HPA axis stuff, started to drop off if they had to do more work than they could provide. So again, not that linear. So when I look at that, all I say is like, I'm not gonna recommend someone does 30,000 steps, especially someone who likes to exercise and is already coming from a low flux environment. If I'm not raising calories, I don't want their thing to be like, I can't outwork a bad diet. Because like a lot of times, if their diet's not that bad, they can outwork their system and then have that down regulation, which isn't helpful. And then we have people that are metabolically damaged, but that's a real problem, especially when we're the ones saying to do these things, because then I think, coach said to do this, I'm just gonna do 100%. And that could be a very, very real issue. Despite their high energy levels of physical activity, the Hadza, show no evidence of elevated total energy expenditure relative to less active populations. So again, they had a high energy level, but since they didn't feed it, their energy expenditure was the same because their body was trying to regulate. And all our clients' bodies are trying to regulate. So the Hadza adults may be compensating either behaviorally, physiologically, to keep total daily expenditures. That suggests that the Hadza adults may be compensating either behaviorally or physiologically to keep total daily expenditure requirements in check. I see this and I see figure competitors and bodybuilders. That drop off of like, I'm gonna protect my food, I'm gonna socially isolate, all those things. So that's an inherent risk of pulling some of these diet interventions, especially when we're talking about low flux and high energy flux. Because low flux, if you get them there as a coach, you can still get these things. And you can get them in higher energy flux, which I'll show, is that when I see people on higher energy flux, yeah, we're fulfilling their appetite with their food. We're pushing calories in the system. We're telling them to move more, do all these things that are healthy, and they're like losing weight or maintaining it long term. What happens if Sally breaks her leg or loses her job? And now this energy curve, this higher energy flux drops off and her appetite's still there, and I didn't prepare her for that. I didn't tell her like, yo, when you like don't do as much activity, you should down-regulate your food. It seems obvious, but it's not, especially when someone's counting macros or like following the plan. It's almost a danger in the sense that they're using the tool and they didn't actually learn shit. And so when I'm releasing people in the wild, I need them to understand what's going on. Hey, we're gonna push more calories. We're gonna try to upregulate NEAT and activity, but that's a thing that we're doing as an active intervention and kind of prepare them for what happens when that isn't a thing. Same thing with lower energy flux. When we have people in diets, which is a lot of clients initially because they wanna lose fat and they want it, they have 3 months. We're driving them into lower energy flux, and they're probably doing exercise because they think it's healthy, especially coming on these plans, and their appetite's up. So they're white knuckling it. Bodybuilders can white knuckle the shit out of that. Sally, I'm not that confident. And even if she could, again, they're paying money to be in the system and I'm releasing them out. I don't know if I'm confident with appetite levels at either end if the flux drops off or when they're in low flux. So big thing, be more Amish. Like that's kind of what this whole presentation's about. I like the Amish, but do the things that the Amish people are doing, try to include that in your practice. So interventions, increase calories. Obviously, you have to use your brain with this. I'm talking about populations that are going through a fat loss phase, and we're starting to slowly increase calories. See if that intervention works. If they drop off or they maintain, make your decisions after that. If they drop off and you add calories in, you can probably add a little bit more in the next week and start to prepare them for when we add these calories back in, things might happen, and like that's cool. Like we're not, so you can kind of buffer that by just having a conversation, being a coach. Scale up NEAT. That don't seem pretty obvious, but like a lot of the benefits we're seeing between 6,000 and 20,000, give or take. I like to start off. This is totally stolen from Mike's system, but start off at about 5,000 or 6,000 steps a day, and just give them a target. We can use cognitive oversight to change that thing, especially with trackers on our phone, pedometers, those little watches that mine's out of power and I don't have it on. But you can give them little goals to add that up and explain to them as we increase calories, we need that, we don't need, you can phrase it a little bit differently, but we want that step number to go up. What do you think you should be at? Oh, I saw on my phone, like I'm at 5,000. And like, what target do you want to get as we increase this? Make them make the choice for this. Scale up physical activity. This is the one where like the research is like, I say let them do the thing that they're going to do and try to find something that they're going to do. It could be like a lot of our clients, it's Peloton. Yeah, Peloton the shit out of yourself. We're gonna add calories in the system. Maybe they walk more, maybe they don't, but like, yeah, we're giving more energy to you. Maybe we can try to see if we can up by like 2 wattage. Or like, what do you think would be a good way with all this extra food to add it in? Don't make it about weight loss or weight gain. Make it about a performance goal and then slowly kind of get them to understand where we're going with this. We're doing this so you can maintain weight loss long-term without us. And a lot of the times, if you force them to do a bodybuilding program and Sally just wants to do Peloton, she's not gonna do that when she's gone from me. So again, that's using your coaching hat and being a coach and use your brain, which is my whole slide basically. But this is what's scary to me. Again, I've said it multiple times, but I get Chad, and Chad is in higher energy flux. Is he going to be safer in this environment with all these excess food cues? And like I'm going to assume on the like that he's going to be hungry as shit if he isn't. So it's one of those things where do I want 2,000 calorie Chad or 3,000 calorie Chad in this environment? And I'm going to make the argument that I want 3,000 calorie Ben House in this environment. It still works. Again, it's going to run its course though soon. It's a good thing I'm done. Think about which Chad you want. Okay, I'm going to choose 3,000 calorie Chad. I'm going to try to build 3,000 calorie Chad over his time with me, so when he's done, he doesn't need me. I can sleep at night with that. Sometimes we don't always get the opportunity, people's lives, finances, all that stuff. I still feel good about getting someone to lose weight, but my goal is to get them here. Okay, so thanks, guys. Do we have any? Who has the first question, Eric? What's your question? Yeah.
People on lockdown. I know San Francisco is on lockdown for 3 weeks, they're saying, Santa Monica, and most likely like where I live downtown LA. So in my clients, it's going to be really interesting to see, I mean, how much weight people are going to start gaining when they realize how important these 5,000 steps, 6,000 steps, 7,000 steps throughout the day, or just being more active, just walking to the store,
Mhm.
could actually have an effect on them.
Yeah, well, and that's why I like to look at it in like the three different things, because you can push it many different other ways, and it's like, what is that intervention? Because for some people, walking isn't like for real isn't doable. Like especially if they're in an office 12 days a week, like a lot of like high performing professionals and lawyers and stuff. Like they're, and you could tell them like go do it pacing in the room, but that's weird. So what is that intervention? It's just more of like, can you arm them with something that they can do and let them choose which intervention they're going to try. But think pushing higher energy flux in that environment that you're talking about, that could be a problem. The food might not be available. So then what? You know what I mean? And then you can get the other end where they're out exercising. You can get shredded. Yeah, but then you might have that physiological drop-offs if they try to get 20,000 steps in their apartment and they're like not eating anything. So it's just, I think the issue isn't necessarily the intervention, it's the education behind the intervention. And having that conversation as a coach and trying not to bias. We talked about pain or psychological stuff. Just try to do it in a way where they understand what's going on and it becomes an educational thing, not a you need to do this or you need to do that. Because then they're left with two choices as opposed to arming them with the ability to make that choice and know how to regulate it.
Would it be like auto regulation in a way, just understanding
Yeah.
hey, on the days where you are more active,
Y-
you can
Yeah, he ruined my whole thing because like I would layer that recovery, like some of those internal cueing. Like I'm going to change my whole thing in the sense that teaching them about their internal regulators of hunger, I think is super helpful in this equation because then they can auto-regulate. And if they understand the difference between high energy flux and low energy flux, and they can understand the benefits of the hunger. Like your hunger might be up, but you're not going to feel as much because you're in high energy flux. When your energy level goes down, like you're going to be hungry, start to listen to that. And then maybe coach them through periods where you take them through both systems and say, this is how I feel with this thing, so that they're armed with it. Again, that was 2 days ago, and I didn't pay for this. I ain't adding in stuff. But that was like one of the big things where like I saw that like I'm going to change my practice because of that. And I already started asking questions.
Take this more seriously, you could get some better coach.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I'm totally serious. The world's about to end. I put together a second presentation. Any other questions? Yes, Carson. No, Eric.
Question, just comment.
Is this a joke? Is it a
Yeah,
joke?
of course
Okay. It's still. Remember my rules. I had a rule. It's my show, but
I like when people get up there and they talk the talk, but they also walk the walk. And your presentation about like excessive calorie intake, you walk that walk. There's your roommate. I saw the first guy I walked in. It's just like chips, cookies, soda, everything. Like, you're really genuine. So respect.
thanks, man. That's a first, I think.
I walked in. I thought like, this is a Van House retreat. Like, so much junk food everywhere.
Eric.
Stick to your guns.
In that Harris study,
Yes.
I'm going to click back to it just because I actually don't remember what. Were they measuring BMR? Or was that just total energy expenditure?
Which one was that? The one at the beginning?
The one where they overfed them and.
Yeah.
What?
They were doing BMR.
Give me the graph. Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were doing BMR.
BMR.
Yeah. So they were just, and it wasn't a big difference, but it was enough to be like, yeah, it's not linear.
Only reason I asked is because I was like, hold on, their calories went up by 100 and they increased their calories by 1,000.
Yeah.
Was that just TDE and TEF? But then I realized
Yeah.
it actually BMR. Okay,
Yeah.
that was one minor question.
You only get one. What's the second one, Eric?
The other one's more of a comment. I think a lot of people have freaked out over that hospice study.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh my God, because their energy expenditure, when even corrected for body weight, is the same as in our society.
Yeah.
But I think a really important thing is that the Amish doesn't appear to be.
No.
They're eating 3,600
Right.
calories, and they weigh like $1.70 for
Yeah, I think they were less than that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between a hunter-gatherer society that is
Yeah.
malnourished and a post-agricultural but non-modern society.
Right, and that's why I added in right there, like they match for the availability of food in their environment. So it's like we don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was where there's two different types of metabolic adaptation in those situations. Is they're dropping off the physiological stuff, and people now in the low-calorie flux are just dropping off activity. So it's just knowing that there's just not a reason to freak out. You just know that there's two different ways to look at it, and you can choose whatever intervention you want. But yeah, they be more Amish for sure.
And I do have one more comment or question, but
What-
I'll go those two.
Wait, is it a comment? If it's a comment, we're good.
Yeah, no, it'll generate a large discussion.
And I think a lot of people, I've used the Poncer study to this.
Mhm.
That there's an inflection point
Yeah.
of where you're not, because I've had CrossFitters who are
Yeah.
as clients who are like, you do the calculations on them, and they're shooting eating 6,000 or 7,000 calories a day, and they're gaining weight at 3,800.
Mhm.
And so I think there's got to be some type of inflection point where more isn't more anymore.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know where it is, but that's my.
When no one's looking at it, they just looked at that exact population and derived all that stuff from that one thing, which was fine. But it's just like we don't know in the like it'd be cool to see in CrossFit people now with the same ish kind of study.
I don't necessarily think it's when is more not more anymore. It's for who. Is
Yeah.
more not more.
Yeah.
Usually
Well, that's where there's a variability in responses, which we talked about is like be a coach. Which factors are you looking at, and what's the variability in that? This just says that there's probably variability in a lot of those things. And there's no, it's not linear, and
I
so
think you're also going to have variability in meat. I think you're going to
yeah,
have variability
all of it. And then that was even the yeah, absolutely. And that's why I didn't like try to. The more I looked, the more I realized it was about bumpers. It wasn't about this thing. And I looked forever, like which physical activity one can I add for this slide that I can give you guys. It was just like, it was a shit show. So it was more like you need to understand that it is variable, and you need to use the research, but also use your experience to then use some of these concepts and make decisions based on the variability of whatever you're attacking.
Can I challenge you on one thing?
Yes.
So there was at one point
No.
where you said, you know, you cut calories and you see metabolic adaptation,
Yeah.
and then you get into a surplus.
The other way around. It was surplus to deficit. Yeah.
You said they could eventually get a surplus of calories in 1,200 calories.
Yeah, I meant it backwards.
What is backwards of that?
Well, they were so like okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. I was saying it was more. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
So
I just described that wrong.
no, well, or you took it to a little bit of an extreme because that's
I meant
definitely-
weight, and then adaptations after that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
weight loss would stop, or
Yeah.
you would turn into weight gain.
yeah, yeah. That's kind. I just said it wrong.
Do you mean that it would turn into weight gain?
Yeah, eventually. Maybe not, but like it depends. But sometimes like they just start, and again that's underreporting too. So a lot of times they'll just get stuck.
That's the only thing I want to challenge you on is it's very easy for us as coaches to just look at the data we see and assume that it's all correct.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's underreporting or lying or anything like that, but I think when you look at the data and you see a huge amount of variability, the nonlinearity that you point to, it's easy to kind of throw your hands up and be like, you don't know what you're
Yeah.
going to get. But there are some constraints. And I don't think we have any reason to believe that you would put someone at a deficit and they could adapt to the point that would become.
Yeah, and I truthfully, it was so I can make the argument for the.
That's all
But like you're right. Like, and that's an extreme example, which probably wouldn't happen. It was just like metabolic adaptation does happen with that thing.
And more importantly, it tells you something. And I think the biggest piece of this, I think the energy expenditure argument's a little thin.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we said, the BMR did go up, but it wasn't much.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see that more isn't always more. But what's extremely convincing to me is the hunger and satiety regulation.
Mm-hmm. And that's like my main, like, if you throw away all this stuff, which interventions kind of layer that get rid of hunger, like that's a win for me in every situation, especially people that aren't like us, like that can white knuckle a good or bad diet and like make it work. And like I deal with Karen, who like hunger is an issue. Like hunger is literally the main issue in our population. It's like, what do I do? I'm hungry.
And it is for us too. It just takes longer.
Yeah. And you can be hungry and do shit. Like there's no way you weren't hungry in those
I
pictures.
got one big open-ended question that will probably generate discussions. If anyone else has any others, I'll
Yeah, what are you gonna say, Ben?
How do you deal with the fear?
The
Adding calories.
I get around it by phrasing things through the thing that they do. So whether it's if I can get them over time, I kind of get to learn what they do, and it's usually if I won't fit people into the higher energy flux if I know that they're sedentary, they're not going to change, or they don't have any physical activity. I just tell them the realistic nature of what's going on. They're going to have to eat less if they want to maintain these fat loss, and just have a real conversation. If they have an in, I use Peloton, but that's a big thing in our group. Yeah, like maybe we can get some better times on this stuff, and like we're just going to use this. Explain to them what maintenance is, but like I don't want them to look at it like that, because a lot of people that explain maintenance to their clients, they're just saying we're upping calories so that you can survive, and that's not really helpful, because then they are fearful of the calories. So I make them not fearful by kind of attaching a performance goal to it, and just not the dry performance, but just like up things a little bit, or like what do you think you could do better in these two things that you do already, and let's do that and add the calories back in. It works.
Stair step.
Yeah.
You're not going like, hey,
No, and some of the dudes I do, Like I tell them, oh yeah, like throw it into CrossFit, but I don't give them much. It just depends on the person. But a lot of my clients, they are fearful, and so I just start off with like a realistic conversation with them, because usually they get to know me a little bit, and I'm going to tell them how it is, and that's that. Every coach is going to use it a different way. I do it that way, just like backdoor it through performance of something. Yeah.
I know, like right now, like intermittent fasting is so big. I have so many clients asking me about it.
Yeah.
And then also with like eating frequency. So, but something like this, are you adding in like more meals every like 3 hours, or just increasing meal size?
I don't give a shit. However they're going to do it, because like again, there's so much variability in jobs, timing of when they can eat. I just approach it by I use the thing that they're doing and just add more. Yeah.
Would you say that like increased meal frequency tends to do better for this? Or
Well,
would you say
it depends. Like for me, it helps to add more calories in. For some people, just doubling up. Like we're talking 200 calories. That could be an extra serving of protein, a little bit more rice on one meal. So like, it depends.
The opposite argument that
Yeah.
there's probably thresholds of hunger that you have to meet.
Yeah.
Like for a meal, like if someone's not eating enough in a meal, it might be more helpful to
Mhm.
add more at that meal. Like if they're at a
Yeah, and that's kind of where like I'll just use my coaching hat and like so like a lot of these questions I'll ask them questions.
Circadian rhythmicity to that as well.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I always run into people always like they end up only trying to do like 2 or 3 meals and then end up binging because they've been waiting all day to eat, and then they just go through the all or nothing personality and they just can't help themselves.
Yeah.
I
We're
think
yeah.
Ultimately, well, the biggest potential issue with your approach, which I think, like you emphasized, you got to put your coaching hat on.
Mhm.
Is that your coaching hat?
This is my Oilers hat.
Depends on which way it goes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need the coach turn around.
That would be
On the,
this. No, this would be this.
That's like mid email.
No, this is my coaching hat.
Okay,
Like
yeah,
street G,
Street
street G, G,
coach.
gangster,
Okay.
coach, gangster coach, GC.
Jeez, okay. coach.
Tell me my fly. I want to hear it. I like
All
your
right,
opinion.
So this isn't your flaw. I think you're good with it. I think if someone got this information and they were probably overly quantitative, they would just be like,
Yep.
all right, add steps, add calories.
Yep.
But I think how you do it is going to matter a lot. Because in the end, what you're ultimately positioning is restraint versus burnout.
Mhm.
Because if you tell someone you need to get in 10, 20,000 steps and exercise
Yeah.
however you want regularly, that isn't just like you put someone on a calorie deficit and you expect them to maintain it, even when it's no longer a calorie deficit, they're
Mhm.
hungry.
Yeah.
That's a constant signal. They don't ever get to auto-regulation or baseline. If someone's environment would normally put them at 5,000 steps, asking them to maintain 7, 10, 15, that is the same thing,
Mhm.
but it's a different thing. It's not hunger.
Yeah.
Kinda,
And that's why I try to get them to come up with their own solutions, and it's usually a step thing. Like, sorry, it's like a graded exposure to it, because usually they can find something, even if it's like, I'll just go to yoga one more time a week, like boom, done. So it's just, that's the coaching hat, but yeah, I would agree, because you can white knuckle walking. Then you get crazy stuff where they're parking at the furthest stall at everywhere, and they're trying to go shopping more so they can walk more, and like there's some crazy shit that we see in the group, and it's like,
So I can tell you, man, the main reason why I don't do cardio and prep anymore is just because
To
Wayne
do-
Norton in 2009 made maybe never want to do that again ever.
Mhm.
So,
well, and that's,
I
But-
mean,
but like, I could use-
That's not the pathway for me.
but I could use that intervention, and like no one likes walking or running, but like
I get steps in. I guess my
Well-
only point is that
it's authority of it as a coach, because like again, if you say this intervention and like let's say it's not their thing, and I'm Wayne Norton and I say go do cardio lots, they're gonna think like I need to do cardio much because this expert said to do it, and that's my only hammer. But I hate it. But they're gonna do it anyways, and then we got the binge eating and we got all the other shit that it just I don't think that they can last long term.
I come back to make it easy.
Yeah.
5 to 10,000 steps, I'm like piggybacking it on something else.
Yeah.
That's not a huge intervention for them.
No.
And they might, but if they can get it 5 days out of the week, or
What
like,
averages for the week too? As I use like
I
also-
think the how is everything.
Mhm.
What I'm getting at is that there will be in my opinion, there would very likely be a very different adherence level and outcome if the coaching advice was increase steps X amount, increase calories X amount, versus
Mhm.
a Skype call about how
Mhm.
can we look to find easy ways to do both of those things.
when I try to put blinders on them as much as I can, like as much as I say I want to educate them, especially in those initial stages, I don't want them to know the ins and outs. You need to do this because this is this much energy, because then you kind of breed that behavior, and then they think it's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause as much as like the statistics of adding it, they're like, well, why is he adding 12,000? Like, is my life ruined? Because I,
Confidence,
yeah.
Yeah.
which I'm gonna layer on top of that when I do it again. But yeah, but like that same thing, that unconscious competence too, or
Glucose regulation.
yeah.
Any type of movement around wheels is great for people who aren't healthy.
Yep.
Maybe the biggest hammer we have. Like, just through, like as Tom said, movements.
You can add other habits to it. Like I'll tell them to go walk
In the morning.
No sunglasses. Just to it's for your circadian rhythm. So I know their circadian rhythm is screwed up. Instead of yelling at them, trying to go to bed earlier at night, they're probably gonna be more tired at night. So I'll start adding benefits to them to try to convince them that this thing is something you should do as part of your lifestyle, not just because I told you to get 7,000.
And like with your system too, like give them choices, give them 3
Right.
choices, and kind of maybe let them give the choices and then make them pick it. So it kind of that's the coaching hat. But I just don't like the bias stuff because I'll just tell them to go lift 6 days a week and like don't do cardio and eat in the surplus is way the best get bigger. But like that's not helpful. So they got to come up with their own thing in their own life, which especially like they don't relate to what I would tell them to do in terms of like if there's a perfect answer. So I don't give them my perfect answer for me. Yes.
This is where I think the
Sorry.
Sonic could be really beneficial for someone who's trying to increase energy expenditure. If you're in, I don't know how many calories you're burning in there, but if you are in there, your heart rate is at 125, 130.
And maybe they like the sauna and the sauna's close to the gym and then maybe they go work out more. So it's like,
Yeah,
it's
something they could use though,
Energy
potentially.
expenditure.
yeah. I didn't even look at that.
I don't think it's that much higher, unfortunately, because the heart is burning a lot of calories, but it's not that long.
So maybe afterwards, like you're seeing.
But like if they came up with that idea, like I would let them do that.
It's actually really easy. Your body just goes like this with the pores. Like you burn more calories in the cold.
Yeah, definitely in the cold. Yeah, that could be another way too.
I mean, I would. Yeah.
Go for a jog outside.
I mean, you can increase your bat.
I looked at that. I bought one of the Oolers because my thought process was, when can I get like
Oh,
the
the Ooler's
longest
amazing.
period of time with being cold? So I tried doing it during the day and it just freaking sucked.
Oh, I
So I'm
like,
like,
so
so
what
what
if
if
I
I
sleep? Not to actually get cold.
Yeah, so what if I do it at night? Can I crank it as low as possible and get that period of, lower cold, and then do I burn more heat from it? After a year, the only thing I figured out is that if I'm in a caloric surplus, I literally can't get the thing cold enough at night. But as soon as I go into a caloric deficit, I gotta start cranking the temp up because I wake up like shivering,
Wow.
Yep. What's up?
which is kind of interesting.
It is
Chili cab.
chili cab. You heard that?
But it does help with sleep.
Yeah, what
actually.
temperature
Yes.
give you after
Huh?
What temperature you say you're at? Hot spot.
Okay.
I've had it go as low
Okay,
as it goes.
David has a question. David was waiting patiently, and then you guys talked
Talking
about.
about Uller now, okay?
Okay,
It's honestly not even a question. I just want to say I appreciate this entire presentation because anecdotally, back when I did a bodybuilding show years ago, I remember like what I would use for my low intensity cardio was 2 40-minute walks with my dog. It was just this simple lube.
Yeah.
And God, by the end, he was dragging my ass, and then just by pumping up the week after to maintenance calories, I was like fucking dancing
Yeah.
around that 40-minute
Well-
walk, and I started getting leaner, and it was just like, what the
See-
hell's going on? So now.
same story when I was trying to get bigger last year because Ben made this argument about I'm not eating enough, and I should know that. But I upped my calories. I was at like 3,800 calories, and I bumped up to 4,200 calories, and I lost weight. And I started trying to mow the lawn like every day. for real, my wife's like, I was like, well, the grass is a little bit taller, and like, cause I'm working from home, and I found ways to do it. And I started looking at my steps. I'm like, I'm usually like a 6,000 step guy. I was at like 12,000, and I was like, oh, I gotta actually like I didn't even know I felt energized.
Yeah, exactly. It was the same thing. It was just kind of
And
like,
so I had to eat more too.
But that matches the Levine study, right? Where they dramatically overfeed it, and like some guys gain like a huge amount of weight, and a couple only gain a couple pounds.
Right, which is that difference of like I'm the dude that they can put more food in and I'll lose.
Versus non-thrifty
Well,
metabolism.
even the study he showed right there, you bump 1,000 calories. We know just from TEF and the
Right.
bump of BMR, that's now an 800 calorie surplus. Even if you're like someone who
Well, and for getting bigger, I wasn't hungry. I wasn't hungry at 3,800 calories. I definitely wasn't hungry at 4,200 calories. I hated food, and I'm still trying to get big, and I'm walking fucking 12,000 steps trying to mow the lawn. So now I have to eat 4,400, and it was like a problem. So it works the other way as well. Yeah, and then just less food.
I don't know that problem.
Bigger.
Yeah. Cool. Oh no! Person's got if he's got a real okay. Is it,
Serious question.
okay. That,
Might be outside the scope. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but it's about energy intake. Do you know what did Cinderella say when she got to the ball?
what did she say, Carson?
oh,
Okay.
Jesus.
That wasn't a good Carson joke. Just sorry.
What